welcome fellow bookworms to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney and today we have my July wrap up. I'm pretty pleased with how July went, especially because it started off slow. I had some books that just took me some time to read, and really I didn't push myself this month, and I still got a lot read, and the game for July actually covers July through September. So I still have like 7 books. I have 6 prompt books and then my character book that I still need to read in August. And then I got all of those on my official August TBR. And so I won't have anything unless I don't get to something. I won't have anything in September, which September I wanted to do more of a mood read. I'll still create a TBR because I like to know ahead of time what I'm reading, but it'll be more just kind of what I'm in the mood for in that sense. I'll just go through and create a TBR based on books I'm really excited about. So I do still have some that will go over into August. Like I said, I did get them. I'm participating in Deck of TBR, which is put on by Becca at Becca Books and Bujo and Chloe at Always Booked. I'll leave both channels linked down below. And so I did my cards pull ahead of time, just so, like I said, I knew what I was reading. So I have a good stack over there that includes all the rest of the game TBR. So that's fantastic. What else? I don't think there's really anything else I need to mention, so we'll just dive right in. So on average, I read 157.5 pages per day, and my audio hours were 28.38 minutes per day. I did read, let's see here, 4,883 pages. 15 of those were physical. I did not have any digital reads this month. I did have 2 audiobooks though, and they were equaled 14 hours and 40 minutes. I had 15 fiction, 2 nonfiction. I did not reread anything this month. My top moods were emotional, reflective, and mysterious. Genres, again, these overlap, but I had 6 contemporary, 4 romance, 4 historical, 3 fantasy, 1 middle grade, 1 classics, 1 LGBTQIA+, 1 true crime, 1 travel, 1 thriller, 1 science, 1 mystery, 1 horror, 1 history, and 1 crime. And so yeah, we'll get into it. As always, if you're new here, I start from the bottom and work my way up to my favorite read of the month, and then I also have a top 3 that doesn't necessarily correspond with star reading, just what is sticking in my mind the most, what had the most impact. So first up, I did not get to one book that I did need to get to technically in July, and that was How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. This was the pick for Autism Reads for July, which Autism Reads is put on by Christine at An Autistic Reader. This will be rolling over though. I definitely still want to read it. So this will roll over and probably be one of the first books I pick up in August. So there's that one. And then I have my 2 books that have been rolling over. The first one is The Odyssey. I did finish the Iliad a couple months back, but we still have The Odyssey. I ended up not touching this at all. I thought I read a few pages in the beginning of the month, but I think because I had some slower reads, I just never ended up picking it up at all. So I haven't made any progress, but I do hope to make some more progress in August. So that will continue to roll over. I think I still have 277 pages left to go. And then the other one is the one I'm reading with my husband, which is Mind Games by Nora Roberts. And so I only read 36 pages of this with my husband. It was just, it was a month of staying up late, or I was reading other things. And so there was one night we read it together and that was it. But we did get through the first section. And so now we are on, part 2 here. Where is it? There it is. Pages are 1 to 6. So yeah, so now we're officially on part 2. It's typically her books are broken up. The romantic suspense are broken up into 3 parts. So we are on part 2. Hopefully we can make some progress in August, if not finish it. So we'll just have to see how that goes. So those are our rollovers that are going to go into August. And then we did not have any DNFs this month, which is always a plus, but we did have two stars. The first one was for the prompt tarot cards. This is a bookworm. Bookworms always go back into the honey jar to be pulled again. So yeah, this was tarot cards, and the tarot card that I ended up pulling was the moon. And I will have the name of this deck linked down below. It's Tarot of the Divine by Yoshitani. But yeah, we pulled the moon, which the prompts for that was trickery, melancholy, anguish, illusion, and insecurity. And the book that I chose definitely fit like the anguish and the melancholy and kind of the insecurity prompt of it. So that book was, get myself organized here, The House of the Seven Sisters by Elle Eggels. This is a translated, I believe, from Dutch. And yeah, going in, I thought the focus would be more on the sisters. It's really told from the eldest sister's daughter. And it's more following her, but all the aunts, her mom, and all the aunts raise her together. Her mom's actually probably less involved than some of the aunts are. And so it's following her. But she's telling about these seven sisters, and basically their mom dies, their dad ends up running off, and they have this family bakery, and so they're trying to keep that afloat. Each sister is kind of going out as they're growing up, finding love, or trying to go off and do something other than the bakery, but they all end up coming back to the bakery. It just was very like trauma and dramatic for just that sake. There really wasn't, like, it was just like a trauma dump. Like everything that every time the sisters found love, like I get like that's the plot of the story is these sisters end up coming back, but like I read the Weird Sisters, which I'll talk about as well. I did a sisters themed vlog, again that'll be linked down below if you want to check it out. And they kind of have the same thing. They were all coming back home. There was only 3 sisters in that one, but they were all coming back home. And so, yeah, like, I think all of them were very, like, similar as far as, like, the trauma of their relationship and such, even though there was different relationships. There wasn't a lot of depth to the characters. It is very short. And so, like, all the sisters just seemed very much like I had a hard time keeping track of who was who. And then there was just weird things too, like weird sexual things. The daughter ends up having a dream one night and all the sisters are turning into animals. And then the one's like this male goat that has an erect member and is telling the other sister that her love interest could never breed her because he's deformed. Which was just weird. There's another sister that had trauma to her nether regions via a cross, because she like fell on it weird, and then she's like fused down there, and she ends up going to like a nunnery, and the nun is fondling her and figures out she's fused down there. So that was just weird. So just things like that, which just weird. And then all the trauma with the relationships and such. And then there is also these villains that come in, and the one is fat and disgusting and lazy, and then the other one, she uses the R word. He's mentally handicapped, and again, just disgusting and gross. And it was done because they're villains, is why they were that way. And that just really turned me off. It wasn't a horrible read, like it was weird and I wasn't really enjoying it, but it wasn't horrible until that point. And then also one of the sister ends up having eating issues, and gains a lot of weight after her breakup, her disaster with her love interest. And that one, I agree, like that can be a thing that happens, and if it had been done better that would have been fine, but again it was just like kind of derogatory as far as like her weight and such. And so yeah, I didn't love this one, and it got 2 stars. I am going to be unhauling this, but that was The House of the Seven Sisters. Then let's see here. Our other 2-star was my genre-thon for June, and I didn't get to it, so it rolled over. And that was The White Bone by Barbara Gowdy. This one. So I thought going in it was like a nonfiction about elephants and like this elephant family. It has like this family tree in there, a bunch of like glossary terms and such. And that's not it. It's like completely like a fantasy elephant story. And so you have these elephants and they can talk to each other and such, which typically I'm a big animal lover. So I like books that kind of, make animals more humanized and they have the story with them and they can talk and such. I like that. In this case, though, it was just weird. Oh, and I forgot to mention in this one, there was also this weird magical realism element that got thrown in there that wasn't there from the beginning. And then, like, it's these sisters that are still alive, and then suddenly it's the people that are dead. Like, that was a weird magical realism element. But anyway, this one also has kind of a magical realism of / fantasy. So some of the elephants have like powers, like some of them are good trackers. The one elephant can mind speak, not only hear like the other elephants' thoughts, but also mind speak to other animals, which the other elephants can't talk to the other animals. Only the mind speaker can. And like the one male elephant has like a knowing. The thing with this one though is again weird sexual things, and almost like pedophile elements. Like the bull is attracted to Mud, who's the main elephant character we're following. We're following 3 point of views, but she's one of the main ones. And he's attracted to her as a calf, and then she's attracted to a calf later on. So that was like weird. Like these are babies, and okay. There's a lot of like the bull elephants, which I get, they're animals, and maybe she was trying to, but it just got very like repetitive and gross. The bull elephants would tunnel into the female elephants to create a tunnel for the calf. And so they would dig the female elephants, and just constant throughout. There was also, which elephants do, they'll eat their dung and, urinate and such. But that was constant throughout. It's like, you're creating a fantasy. I don't need, like, maybe mention it once. Hey, elephants do this. But then I don't need to know about that. Elephants also get a thing where their penis can turn green, which was in there. And again, cool. I didn't know that fact. But just the constant, like, weird sexual things and such. And then you never, like, the plot never really resolves or wraps up. So you're following these elephants, like, that's what I was hanging on for. Otherwise, I probably would have DNF'd it. But you're following these elephants, and this plot, the basic premise is it deals a lot with poaching and such. And there's also a major drought. So they're during a drought, they have no access to water, food's scarce, and then they're also being poached by people. And so you have that element, which I love. But there's this kind of lore that there's this white bone, which is a bone of a calf that the family was massacred by poachers, and the other bones all turned to dust, but there's this one white bone, and if you find that white bone, it will lead you to a safe place, essentially. And so you're following, like, are they going to find the white bone and such? And it never really resolves. Like, are they going to get to the safe place? And so you don't get any resolution either, and you're slogging through all this weird sexual stuff and weird, defecation and urination things, like bathroom habit stuff, and then you don't even get a resolution. So, very disappointed in this. This will also be unhauled, because, yeah, as much as I love elephants, I don't see myself ever rereading that one again. And then we had one 3-star read. So this one was an extra one, but it was for my ABC title challenge, so I had to get it read again in July, and that was The Queen's Lady by Shannon Drake. And this wasn't horrible, but I really enjoyed it in the beginning. Like, it hooks you right away, because basically the first little bit you read is like the end of the book, so it hooks you because you're like, it's a romance, like how did they get here, like what's going on. And so I'm hooked right away, and then you start reading, and initially, like, the characters are really likable. So basically, she's the Mary Queen of Scots lady, um, and Mary Queen of Scots, ended up, from France to back to Scotland is when this is all taking place. And of course, there's a lot. Mary Queen of Scots is a Catholic, and the country has turned Protestant. And so there's a lot of like political upheaval, and then just also like power struggle between the different clans and such. And so there's also her half brother, Mary's half brother, has been basically running things, and he has a laird, Rowan, who kind of is helping, keep things going and such. And so that's the love interest. Well, Rowan is married at the beginning of the book, but his wife suffered an accident, lost the child she was carrying, which would have been their first child, and then also has like traumatic brain injury, and so she's just mentally no longer there, but he's still married. And so he's not celibate, so he does sleep, but he makes sure he sleeps with people that are lower class, and there's never going to be an attachment. Well, he's very attracted to our main character, Gwyneth. And so the queen's like, I need you guys, to go to England and talk to my cousin, and I want her to name me heir of the English throne. And so, all that historical stuff, from what I know and what I kind of looked up, is accurate. But basically, there's a lot, again, just drama for drama's sake. So the things that were happening. And initially, you have Rowan, and he's still married, and he's kind of struggling with his feelings because he's like, I'm attracted to this woman, but I'm still married. And on their travels, they stop at his house because his wife is dying. And so they stop there, and she's not mentally there. And so she, has night terrors and such, doesn't recognize Rowan. Well, one night he's exhausted. It's like that first night, and her nurse had just stepped away when she has a night terror, and Gwyneth goes in and she sings to her, and so then she's able to calm his wife down, and so then he's like conflicted about that, and so there's kind of this depth of emotion there, but there's, Gwyneth gets stolen a couple times, and there just seemed like there was drama for drama's sake. The way the queen's kind of meddled, which I know, like, she's a queen's lady, the queen has to approve any matches and such, but just kind of the way the queens were, and it's like you're following this historic event, but the way you're writing the queens and their actions don't necessarily make sense, so it doesn't even seem that this is like real history at all. And obviously it's fictional history, like it's based on this stuff, but it's a complete fiction. And so, yeah, it just didn't seem very believable, and the longer you went on, the less depth there was, and kind of the way Rowan and Gwyneth come together, it's just, oh, he feels so guilty, and he's kind of treating her horribly, and then all of a sudden they're together and everything's hunky-dory, and so you lose that depth of emotion that was there in the beginning. And then the longer it goes on, again, just the way the queens are meddling and such, and the things that are happening to Gwyneth just seems drama for drama's sake. And so, yeah, I didn't love it. The longer I went on, the less I loved it. But it is a romance. It was fun. And also the writing. I meant to mention this. The writing. So sometimes, like with side characters, she would use like a Scottish dialect, but for the most part, she wouldn't. And also, it felt like when they were having dialogue, it felt very modern. Like this could be a modern romance. And so it didn't really feel like I was in, 1500s Scotland. It didn't feel like that at all. And so that kind of took me out of the story as well. But it was a fun little romance. And so, yeah, it got 3 stars. So I will probably be unhauling this as well, though. And then let's see here, we had 4 stars. So the first one was an extra one. I read this for Kim from Expedition Through Pages, her Tales from Two Trails game. I'm on Team B, which is Elephant Team. And if you've been following along this round, you definitely, if you haven't watched the latest video, you have to go watch it because it was bananas. But anyway, I didn't have books on my TBR that worked, so I chose this one for the nonfiction prompt, and that was The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. It's murder, magic, and madness at the fair that changed America. And so basically you're following two different people. You are following the guy, I forget their names, and it doesn't say on the back, but you're following the guy that built the World's Fair, was the lead architect for the World's Fair in Chicago. So you're following him and the building of the World Fair, which I'm not all that interested in architect, and so it was kind of a slog to get through some of those parts, but it alternates between that and the serial killer that was living in Chicago, really close to the Chicago Fair at the time, and kind of took advantage of the Chicago Fair to get victims and such. And so it's going back and forth. Unfortunately, I don't think there was just enough content for the serial killer. And so, I can see why he kind of combined them, but it's two very different stories. And I just don't think the serial killer point of views really held up because there just wasn't enough information. And I get, we don't know how many were victims. A lot of the people who came into contact with him and disappeared, it's just speculation that they were victims. And so there's not a lot of information, but he would just be this person, da-da-da, and then they disappeared. And so it really wasn't all that satisfying, oh, this is what happened, which I get you don't know. But there just wasn't enough information for that portion to hold up. And then the architect, it was interesting kind of see, the difficulties and such of the World Fair being built. But, the whole architect and such, it kind of was a slog, but it was interesting, and it did kind of paint this picture. And then also there was some other point of views that just seemed pointless, didn't need to be in there and make this book longer. But yeah, this one took me the longest to read. I think I averaged about 30 to 50 pages a day on this one, and it took me about a week, I want to say, to read. So yeah, it just was kind of a bit of a slog to get through, but it was interesting. And I think if you're more interested in architecture, you might enjoy this more than I did. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about that one. So then we had another book that was for my sister themed vlog. This is also part of my game. And this one was for Coco, which was Dia de los Muertos. And for this one, I went with my sister, the serial killer, because she's obviously killing people. And so I thought that worked for Day of the Dead. And this is by Oyinkan Braithwaite. And yeah, this one, I think, I don't really like the chapters are extremely short. All of them are like this, a page, maybe two. Just short little snippets. I typically don't like that. I want more. And so I think that was part of it. Also, again, just the way they painted, people's weight and such, it was a little bit derogatory. Or there's one man who's in the hospital who's very sickly that she talks to because he's in a coma. And so she talks to him about her sister who's a serial killer, and just the way he was described, he's very thin and spindly. And just the way he was described was very just a negative light. And so I didn't appreciate that part. The short chapters were part of it. But other than that, it was kind of an interesting book. So basically, you have Coretti, and Ayula is a serial killer. She kills her boyfriends or the men she's seeing. And then Coretti is a nurse at a hospital, and so she ends up always coming and helping her sister clean up the bodies, and she's killed 3 so far. And then the doctor that Coretti works with, she's very attracted to him. And her sister ends up coming into work today, and then the doctor asks for her sister's number, and things kind of progress from there. But she knows like her sister's gonna kill him, like, and so she's kind of divided. Like, does she protect her sister like she has been, or does she warn the doctor, who she also is very attracted to and cares about? What does she do? And so that's part of it. And I understand like kind of the narrative around looks, because the sister is conventionally attractive where Coretti isn't. And so that plays a part in it, because the men are always just like fawning over her. And this Coretti doesn't get that same attention. And so that's part of it. There's also kind of flips back to the past because their father was abusive, and so it goes back to moments with him as well, so it's kind of going back and forth. But yeah, it was interesting. It was a fun time, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, what would you do in that situation? Like, would you protect your sister, or would you protect the man that you have feelings for, even though he doesn't care about you at all? And so yeah, it was an interesting concept. I think I don't remember which African country. I was gonna say Nigeria, but I don't know 100% if that's true. I can't remember. But yeah, so it has, a little bit of Africa and African culture and such, but it was fun. I did enjoy this overall. Just a few things that made it not a 5-star for me. Then we have my genre-thon pick for July, which was Independence Day, and I kind of did a twist on it, and so it was to read a translated work, because America and in the U.S. is very much a mixed pot, and so I ended up going with My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, which has been a TBR fail before. I think I got Pinocchio, which was a translated work, and didn't end up reading this, and so it was perfect to pick up for my genre-thon. And this is translated from Italian. This is book 1 in the Neapolitan novels. And this one is very rambly and a little bit hard to follow, which is what dropped it down for me. But basically, you're following these two friends, and they're from this very poor neighborhood. And so it is a coming-of-age story. And so initially they're not really friends, and their relationship is very toxic, and even later on their friendship is actually kind of toxic. But it basically starts off is the one friend, they're now adults, and the one friend disappears. And so Elena, the other friend, so it's Elena and Lila. Lila disappears, and so Elena's like now telling their story. And so it starts when they're kids in this poor neighborhood in Italy, and then kind of how they're past. So after elementary school, like, you have to take the special tests and such to get into middle school. And so the one friend, they're kind of competing against each other, so there's a little bit of rivalry academically. And like, Elena does anything Lila does, Elena does, essentially. Like, she just follows her. And so Lila ends up not going on to middle school, where Elena does. She goes to middle school and then high school, and then Lila is working for her father, and helping her mother in the house and such. And then it goes up until a point they're about 15 or 16, somewhere around there, like their teenage years. And there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of rivalry between some of the families. There's a lot of drama between the families. Like, the one guy has this mistress who is not mentally well. And so that creates, like, she's always fighting with his wife, and then they end up leaving. And she's just not mentally well. And so there's drama with that. And drama between some of, like, the sons of the different families and whatnot. And so yeah, it's just a lot of drama, a lot of violence, a lot of poverty. and kind of the way these two friends' paths differ, but how they keep coming back together as well, and just kind of their coming of age story. So overall, I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't like, I had a hard time getting into it a little bit, and it was very rambly at first, and so I had a hard time following along at first, but I was very invested by the end, and I am excited to pick up the rest of the series. I have all the books, so I'll just have to see when I'm able to pick up the next one. But that was My Brilliant Friend. And then the last one, which was 4 stars, was for the prompt of favorite or random color. Again, a bookworm, so this will go back into the pot, or the honey jar. And so for this one, I chose Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. And this was also my pick for Butterword because it was things dealing with measurement, and I went with Infinite. And this one, so I don't really have necessarily a favorite color. Like, sometimes there is a color where I'm like obsessed with for a month or so, but I really don't have a favorite color. So normally I would just randomize, but I went with this one because I am very drawn to this color scheme here. I like kind of like the rainbowy, a little bit more muted, not as vibrant. Like, that's why I went with that for this one. And this one, the only reason it's 4 stars is because I wanted more. Like, if this had been a little bit longer, and done in a different narration style, I think I would have fully given it 5 stars. There just was kind of this lack of emotion. So basically, it's following this immigrant family, and they end up getting separated. So the mom and the 2 oldest siblings, sister and brother, are in the US, and the dad and the youngest sibling are in Colombia because they went to the US. They did have visas, but they expired, and the dad ends up getting deported. The mom can't find anybody to watch the baby, because she's still in diapers, and the rule is they have to be out of diapers. And so they're like, send her back. She can be raised by her grandmother in Colombia. Because she was born here, she'll be able to come back. And so she gets sent back as a baby to the grandmother to raise. Well, we start off, Talia is the youngest one, and she threw hot oil in a man's face. And so she gets sent to basically juvie, but it's this girls' school run by these nuns, but it's a detention center essentially. Well, she ends up escaping from there, and she's trying to get back up to where her father is so she can fly and be reunited with her mom and siblings in the US. So she's basically on the run and hitchhiking and trying to get back to where she needs to be so she can leave the country. And so it's following kind of her viewpoint, and then also it goes back and starts with their parents' love story, and then kind of how they ended up in the US, how they ended up getting separated, the years between then and now, and what kind of took place during those years. And you learn, like, it's very short, like, little, the chapters aren't super short, not like in My Sister the Serial Killer, but there's just not a lot of depth. Like, it's very much, this is what's happening during this moment. So you don't get a lot of the, like, the thoughts and the emotion of what the character's thinking or their thought process. It's just very much, this is what's happening. And you later on learn that one of the other siblings is the one that's narrating this, and they're writing this. And so she's like, you've been reading my words, and, you know, this. And then the other sibling also inserts some stuff here talking to the sibling that's writing the book. And so it's just very much like a kid writing their family history in a journal. Just kind of journaling their family history. And so again, you don't get a lot of the thought and the emotion and such. And so I think either if it had maybe been a little bit longer, like, I appreciate a short book. It's 191 pages. So maybe a little bit longer, or if it hadn't been that narration style and we got a little bit of more of the emotion and such, I would have enjoyed this. But you have this family that's torn apart, and it should really touch you, and it just didn't for me. I did like there's like this folklore element where her grandmother's telling her stories, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But yeah, I needed more from this. I just needed more, but really really good, and I like the unique viewpoint of undocumented immigrants, and the struggles they face and such. So I did really enjoy that. But there's that. Then we had 10 5 stars. I always typically have a lot of 5 stars. And so yeah, we hit it out of the park with our 5 star reads. So the bottom of the barrel was another one I picked up for Kim from Expedition Through Pages, Tales from Two Trails game. This was for viewpoint opposing to yours. And for this one, I went with From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. And so traveling the world to find the good death. And so basically it's these different death customs from around the world, and even some that are in the US. Like there's the eco death, where they're trying to get it where they can turn the bodies into compost. There's an open air pyre one in Colorado, I think it is. So there are some from the US and then some from other countries. And I went with this one as opposing views because there's some, like, there's one, like, they basically keep their dead in these houses, and then, I don't know if it's every year, I want to say every year, they go and they basically spend time with their dead, like, reclothe them and brush dust off of them, which I don't know about that. So that's why I kind of went with that, because there's some death customs that I'm just like, I don't know about that. So, but it was really, really interesting to read this, and kind of see what different customs were from around the world. I do, again, wish there had been a little bit more variety, and different cultures. Like, there's a good selection here, but I wish maybe we had seen some, like, African cultures, which we don't really get to see, and things like that. But it was really interesting. Obviously, gave it 5 stars. But yeah, that was From Here to Eternity. I love Caitlin Doughty. She does have a YouTube channel. She hasn't been very active on it though. YouTube kind of, she puts a lot of work, like it's more like documentary style stuff. But YouTube, I know they demonetized something of hers. Um, and it was just kind of this battle, and then she ended up going on sabbatical for a while. But yeah, I absolutely love her YouTube channel, and I've read all 3 of her books now, and I've really enjoyed them as well. Then the next was actually, I'm reaching for something that's not there. I do want to get a physical copy though, and this was just an extra. I was doing stuff on the computer, and I wanted an audiobook to listen to. And so I went with Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. And it was narrated by Sneha Mathen, I want to say. Let me see. I have it written down. I just gotta find where I wrote it down. But yeah, it was really well narrated. Yes, Sneha Mathen. It was pretty good. As far as love the narration, I just had trouble following along the characters. So basically, it's based on the Marab Hata. I'm probably butchering that. I'll list it here. If I don't have it in front of me, I can't remember. And I've been really stressed lately, so my brain is extra flaky. But anyway, so it's based on this Indian epic, kind of like Kaikeyi was, which Vaishnavi Patel wrote Kaikeyi and then wrote this one. And I really enjoyed, like, basically you have this river goddess, and she comes down from the heavens and then kind of gets trapped by Shiva, because she's volatile, she's water, she's volatile. She's just this river, and then she gets cursed. There's like these godlings, and she's very protective of them, and they get cursed and she gets cursed, and so basically she becomes mortal and she has to rebirth these godlings, and so she births them, and she's married to this king, and each time she births them, she ends up, which it does deal with this, so she does take them to the river and drown them. So that might be triggering for you, so keep that in mind. It does kind of warn you about it. I didn't think it was all that graphic or anything like that. But basically that way they go back to their God form, like their souls are God and they're not. They don't become humanized. And her last son, her husband's suspicious by this point, and comes upon her before she's able to, put him in the river. And so he takes her son away and is like, I'm done with you. And that was the last son. So now her curse is broken and she goes back to her river form. And she's like, you'll need to bring him to me every month so I can see him. And so at first he does, but then he kind of breaks that pact. And so you're following along that storyline. And then you jump ahead and there's this war that happens. And so you're jumping ahead to like the lead ups of the war. And that's where I got lost, because you have basically, it's kind of the line from her son, the last son that she birthed, that royal line, but there's also some cousins. And so the two royal lines are like fighting for power essentially. And so you're following them, and at some point her son's name changes to something else, and so that really confused me, especially listening to it. I probably missed something, and then keeping track of the different people and who we were following. I got a little lost, but it was so good, so I still gave it 5 stars, but I do need to reread it physically because I retain things better when I'm reading it physically, and I did get a little bit lost as far as that whole line. But yeah, it's basically the war and then kind of her journey as this river goddess, and her son's part, in the war and everything like that. So really, really good. Really enjoyed it. And then the next one was The Weird Sisters by Eleanor Brown. So another one for my sisters themed blog. This one was I had 3 unusable discs, and there's 3 sisters in here. And so this one, again, was a little bit hard for me to get into, but very interesting. So it's told in first person plural. So it's basically all the sisters' voice telling the story. And so it would be like, our sister so and so, but so it's like there's this 4th sister narrating it, but there's only 3 sisters, so they're all kind of telling. So they talk about themselves in the 3rd person, but it's first person narration, but it's plural. It's really weird. I've never read anything like it before, and I was very confused at first, and it did take me a little bit to get into. It's also very like slow paced in the beginning, and so that took me a minute to really get invested. But basically, again, trigger warning. There is a trigger warning. Their mom is battling cancer. So basically you have these 3 sisters, and they're all coming back home. The oldest sister has stayed there, essentially, like not in the home, but living in the town. And then she comes back home to help her parents. And then the other 2 sisters end up coming home as well. Not necessarily because of their mom, but they're each kind of facing this different crossroads. So the eldest sister, her fiance gets an opportunity, like they're academics, and her fiance gets an opportunity in London at Oxford. But she's like, I need to stay home. My mom's here. She's a homebody. She's never wanted to leave. And then she's also worried about her mom. And as the oldest sister, she's kind of always taken on that caretaker role anyway. And then the middle sister ends up in trouble. She ends up embezzling from her company. So she has all this debt and she's in trouble. And so she ends up coming back home. And then the youngest sister ends up pregnant after, not really a one night stand, but like just a casual fling. She ends up pregnant, and so she ends up coming back home as well. And then meanwhile, their mom's battling cancer, and the sisters, I really enjoyed this one because the sisters, they're all very different. And so they don't necessarily get along all that well or really understand each other, but they do love each other and they have all these shared memories. Their father is also a professor of Shakespeare, and so they talk a lot in like different Shakespearean quotes and such, which that part was a little lost on me. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm not. I know what I know of Shakespeare is basically just kind of the average knowledge. I haven't really read anything by him or anything like that. And so it's more, different retellings or whatever, or movie adaptations is how I know his works. And so that was a bit lost on me. And I know like some of the reviews were annoyed because of all the Shakespeare quotes, but that's part of the story and it's quirky and it's fun. And so, yeah, they're having to come together and help their mom, and then also kind of, like the baby, just because I'm the baby and the irresponsible one, like, I can change that. And the oldest one, like, I'm the caretaker, but that doesn't mean I'm stuck here and such. And so just kind of processing and figuring out their life after, reaching these crossroads. It was really good. Really, really enjoyed this. And that first person plural was so unique. So there's that one. Then next up, we had my mood read, which again, another bookworm. This will go back in. And for that, I chose A Sprinkle of Sorcery by Michelle Harrison. This is book 2. I'm guessing, I don't know what the series is called. A Pinch of Magic is the first one. And just so much fun. You basically, again, have 3 sisters, and they have a little bit of magic. And so in this one, there's kind of this girl that shows up, and they end up kind of helping her a little bit. There's people searching for her. They end up kind of going on this trip as well and searching for like the shipwreck. So there's kind of pirate element, and they're basically looking for this treasure. And this girl's trying to prove that her father's innocent because he's been accused of murdering his best friend because they went out together and he's the only one that came back. And so she's trying to prove that my father's innocent, and the Wittershins are helping her, but also their youngest sister gets mistaken for her, and gets taken. And so they're trying to track down their younger sister and also help this girl and find this treasure and such. And so it's just a lot of fun. Like, the sisters are so cute, all very different, very unique, like, traits and such. I love the youngest sister, Charlie. She's absolutely adorable. And yeah, it's a good time. I think there's 2 more in the series. I have the 3rd one. I still need to pick up the 4th in the series. But this one, I was like, I needed something for a cozy reading night for Kim's game anyway. And so I was like, what's better than a cozy middle grade? So that was adorable. I absolutely loved it. Then let's see here. We had... So this was an extra one because the first book in the series I did pull for my game, and I wanted to read all 3 of them at the same time. And so this is actually the 2nd book in the series, but excuse me, goodness me. It's the 2nd book in the series, but it was my least favorite, and that is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This is by Talia Hibbert. And so this is the Brown Sisters trilogy. And yeah, it's not that I didn't like this one. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. I just didn't relate to these characters as much as I did to the other characters in the series. So basically, you have Dani Brown, who is the middle sister, and she just doesn't believe in relationships. She doesn't think they work. And she is, again, an academic. And so she is doing her thing there and doesn't really believe in love. And so she's very clear up front that, this is no strings attached. Like, and so she has just broken it off with another professor who wanted more than Dani was willing to give. And there's this security guard at her school, and there's a drill, like a fire drill, and she ends up getting trapped, and so he comes and saves her, even though it's just a drill. And so they go viral, #Rugbae, and it goes viral, and people are shipping him, and it's helping. He has this charity where he teaches rugby to these boys and also incorporates mental health. And so that's really helped his charity. So he's like, hey, why don't we fake date? And then she's like, hey, like, we're attracted to each other. Like, why don't we have a friends with benefits relationship, but no strings attached? Like, I don't do that. Well, he's a romantic. Like, he doesn't do casual. And she's like, no. And I really like how this author, like, those conflicts that come up, most authors would take that and run with it and like really amp it up. And this one, like, you know, he doesn't get mad at her. Like, he realizes, hey, I don't do casual. I realize this is gonna mess me up, but I want to have a relationship, and she won't give more. And so he kind of hints like, hey, like, you should think about more, but he doesn't get mad at her. He doesn't, pressure her and create a big to-do. He realizes she was clear up front. This is what she told me. So any expectations I have, that's on me. And I really like how this author does that. And I'll talk more about the other issues in the other books that, the conflicts. But I really like that about her. And so yeah, so they end up fake dating, no strings attached, friends with benefits. And Danny has to kind of realize like her fears and then kind of how to let go of those fears. And I also like the mental health rep. He has like anxiety and such. So I really like that as well. And this is very similar to one of the other books I read for my sister's vlog because of that sports and mental health rep, which I really, really liked. So there is that one. Then we have the third one in the series, which was Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I probably like the, I don't know, it's kind of was a mix between this one and the first one in the series because I think I like these characters a little bit more. I could really relate to Eve a lot, but I like the way the plot and the conflict was handled in Act Your Age. Chloe Brown a little, or Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is Act Your Age. So I like the Chloe Brown, like the way the plot went a little bit more. In this one, you do have autistic rep. I thought it was Eve Brown going in, like the main, but it's actually the love interest who is Jacob, I want to say is his name. Yeah, Jacob. And so basically, Jacob runs this B&B. He's looking for a chef. There's this event coming up that he needs a chef for. It'd be really good advertising for him, but his old chef won the lottery and took off. And in comes Eve, and her parents basically, she had an incident at this wedding planning thing, and they're basically like, you need to grow up, you need to figure out your life and go with it. And so she ends up going for this drive, ends up in this town, sees the sign, and goes in. Well, Jacob is autistic and he doesn't like chaos, and Eve is very chaotic. And so he's like, no way, I'm never gonna hire you. Well, his friend's like, you need somebody, like, let's give her a try, and like, you need somebody desperately. So convinces him to give her a try. He goes out, tries to talk to her. It's raining. She ends up hitting him with his car, or with her car. And so his friend is basically like, well, we really need you now, so like here's a place to stay in his apartment. And Jacob's in the hospital, and so she kind of takes over, and then when he gets home, she's helping out, and he learns like she's not quite as chaotic as she appears. I love Eve has a musical stem, which I definitely stem to music. I always have a song playing in my head. I often make up songs to sing. Like I'll sing a song to the dogs and such. So I really related to that musical stem. And I do like a little bit of a spoiler here, but not a huge one, because you can definitely tell throughout the series that the sisters are neurodivergent. But Eve does figure out, hey, I'm on the spectrum too. And so I like that you got that different viewpoint, like how it can present differently in men and women, and such, and how like you can have a more introverted autistic person versus maybe a more extroverted person. And so yeah, I just love this one. I like the musical stem. I will say, like, kind of the big conflict, I wish she had highlighted a meltdown, because I definitely feel Jacob was headed there, and you just didn't get that. And I think that would have been the perfect opportunity to highlight what that can be like. But again, kind of the way like they each took responsibility for their own part in the conflict instead of just getting mad at the other person. I really liked that one. So there is that. Then we had the one that was part of my game, and this was the Aristocats, and it was cat character. And so for this one, I went with Get Alive Chloe Brown, because you do have a smudge there. And so basically, she is chronically ill. And after her diagnosis, she kind of just shut down and stopped living. Well, she almost gets hit by a car and dies. So she decided, you know what? I need to stop letting this illness hold me back. Life's too short. So I need to get a life. And so she makes this list of things she wants to do that will help her get a life. One of which is moving out. So she moves out from her parents' mansion. And she doesn't get along with the superintendent of the building. He kind of has this class bias. He was dating this girl that was a higher class, rich girl, and kind of has some trauma from that. And Eve is kind of a little bit standoffish and such, and comes across snobby. And so they just have very much misperceptions about each other. And so they end up, she's saving this cat. He ends up helping her save this cat. And then she's like, hey, like, you can help me in other ways too. You have a motorbike. That's one of the things I want to do. And so she kind of shows him this modified list. And he helps her with some of the things on the list. And he's realizing, hey, like, she's not what I thought she was. And he has some relationship traumas. She has some relationship traumas as far as both romantic and friendships, because after her illness and such, she lost a lot of people. And so she kind of has trauma from that. And again, kind of when the conflict arose, it wasn't, they each took responsibility for their own part and recognizing, hey, I need to work on this. And I really liked how they resolved it and everything else. And Red is just awesome. And Chloe's awesome. And then the cat. And it's just, this series is a lot of fun. I love their aunt. Gigi, or not their aunt, their grandma, Gigi. She's awesome as well. Like, great characters. It does have LGBTQIA rep with their grandma, and then Danny is bi as well. I love the chronic illness rep. I love the autism rep. Like, this series, it definitely lives up to the hype for sure. So yeah, that was that book, and really enjoyed that as well. Then let's see here. Next is another one I don't have. And so this was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this was the group read for Team Elephants from Kim from Expedition Through Pages, Her Tales from Two Trails. It was the group read, and it was an author from an island. And so I have never read this. I ended up listening to it. And again, just really, really enjoyed it. It kind of took me by surprise, but basically you're following this guy and he's trying to figure out what is the deal with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like, who these people are. There's some violence, and so it's like Mr. Hyde, like, is the suspect, and trying to figure out, like, what's going on there. Is basically, the vibes are fantastic. The narration on this one was narrated by, let's see, should have put it here, Richard Armitage. So, yeah, it was just so good. Like, it definitely took me by surprise, and just kind of the vibes of it, like the mystery and the spookiness and like the violence. Like, it was really good, and I really enjoyed listening to it. It's very short. I would love to read it again, just because I retain stuff better if I read things. Next, we have, this was for Kinga and Rue, Best Mom, Maternal Maine. And so for this one, I went with The Other Side of Disappearing by Kate Clayborn. So this was obviously part of my sister's reading vlog. This was a Goodreads giveaway I got a few months back. And I really enjoyed this. Had a lot of elements that I love. It has a podcast element, a kind of a road trip, and searching for secrets and uncovering these family secrets on the road trip, which I love. And also these two sisters. So basically their mom runs off, and she runs off with this con man, Linton Baltimore, I want to say. Yeah, Linton Baltimore. And so the oldest sister is left to raise her younger sister, her younger half-sister. And she knows that her mom ran off with this con man. She never tells the younger sister, and just raises her. And then the younger sister figures it out, contacts this podcast who did a case on Linton Baltimore, this host, and so it's her and her producer, and then the two sisters end up going on this road trip trying to follow the trail of where they went and discover what happened. Again, the main male character, which is the podcast producer, he used to do football, and again deals with mental health around that, and mental health in sports. And so that was kind of similar to Danny Brown. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed these characters together. It was a little insta-lovey, but it was just so good. I didn't even care. And so they end up falling in love, but she is very guarded. And then he has his own trauma and such. And so they're kind of having to learn to open up to each other. And then also that sisterly relationship, and kind of their dynamic. Like, she's always raised her and been a mother figure, and now it's like, you're an adult and you deserve to know the truth about our mother, but I was trying to protect you, and kind of figuring out like the forgiveness, their dynamic, because they are sisters. They're not mother and daughter, even though she raised her and was a mother figure to her. And so it's dealing with forgiveness and growth and everything like that. And I love the romance element. I will say the ending was a little lackluster. Like, I understand it, but it was just a little lackluster to me. But otherwise, I absolutely loved this enough that even with those few little things, it got, one of the top spots for the month. So there is that. Then the last one that I read was, this was a black space on my game, so I did pull 2 prompts. My rules for the space is if I can find one book that fits both prompts, I can just choose the one book. Otherwise, I have to choose 2 books. In this case, I think it fit both. And so we had The Princess and the Frog, which was class bias. The glare doesn't want to focus. And then we also had Piglet, which was underappreciated. And so for this one, I went with The Paper Daughters of Chinatown by Heather B. Moore. This is based on a true story, so it's following Donaldina Cameron, who was a real person, who did this work. And so it is fictionalized, but it does follow closely like the events of this period in her life. And so basically she is at this mission school where they save these paper daughters who are Chinese women who have been brought into the U.S. with false papers, and sold into slavery and like the sex trafficking, prostitution life. And so it's about her work with these daughters at the school, but there are fictional characters as well. So I really liked in the beginning, it gives you a list of which characters are fictional and which ones are the real characters, which I really, really appreciated that. I love that transparency. And yeah, so it's just following her work, the dangers of it, and just her time at the school from the time she enters the school until the earthquake of San Francisco that destroyed it, and then it kind of wraps up with the school being rebuilt. And so you have her, and then you're also following a fictional character who is a paper daughter, and she gets told that her and her mom get told that she's going to go to America and marry a rich man. But in truth, she gets sold into to be a prostitute, a sex trafficker. She's sex trafficked. And so I really like those two viewpoints. And it just, the writing was really good. I was worried. I thought it was going to be really dense. Like, it looks like it's dense, but it really was an easy read. It was easy to get into the story and follow along. It does deal with very heavy subjects. It never gets really graphic, but things are implied. I will say, kind of thinking back on it, there is like a love element that happens that is a little bit messed up, and I don't know that I necessarily like how the author did that. But the role he played in helping things, it does kind of make sense that she went that route. So there's that. I did leave a bookmark in here just because there was a part that I wanted to share. Let's see if I can find it. I didn't mark it other than just leaving my bookmark. Okay. So they're basically talking about, it's after the earthquake, so the destruction and such, and how that didn't destroy the underbelly of Chinatown. Like, it's still, the corruption and such is still there. So it's like the war continues. And she's talking to this police officer, and he goes, "I'm afraid so. We might live in the land of the free, but none of us are truly free as long as slavery exists in our society." And I really like that quote. Like, it's so true. And the thing is, like, we like to think, oh, that's a thing of the past, but it's really not. Like, it's still an issue. I like at the end it includes like resources. If you want to learn more about human trafficking and such, like, it includes that. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did see some reviews who said like it was like the white savior complex, but she actually did this work. Like, it was based on this real person, not like the woman's just making up this white savior. And I didn't get that at all. Like, she really cared about these women, and she wasn't doing it to be like, oh, I'm white and I'm gonna save you. She did it because what was happening to these women was horrible, and she was in a position where she could help. And yeah, I really enjoyed the book, and I didn't think, I mean, I don't really know about the culture all that well, but they also said there was like cultural stereotypes. I didn't think that came across, but I also don't know enough about the culture. But I really enjoyed the book. So anyway, that is all the books I read. Now we'll go ahead and talk about my top three. Again, I know this is a long wrap up. So the number one spot does go to The Paper Daughters of Chinatown. I like the basis on true events. I liked how it highlighted human trafficking, because even though this was a historical, that still happens today. And so it's a good, to showcase that. Like, yes, this happened in the past, but it does still happen today as well. I like the found family aspect because these girls have lost everything, and they're coming together and they create their own little family. And then I like the list of real versus fictional characters. Like I said, that transparency really elevated the book for me, because often when I'm reading one that's semi-based on true events, I struggle. Like with the Queen's Lady. Obviously, the Queens are real people, like real historical people. But I often wonder, like, is this a real person or is this a fictional person? So I like that transparency. The second spot goes to Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. I like the undocumented immigrant perspective. I don't think you see that a whole lot. The family dynamic, how they're torn apart, and kind of what that looks like for them and their relationships. The traveling element, because she runs away from the school and she's traveling and trying to get back to where she can catch a plane and get out of the country. I really like that. She's hitchhiking, and that's something I'm finding I really enjoy. Not so much a road trip, but like they're either on the run or they're searching for something, like, and there's travel involved in that way. I like the folklore element, like the little stories from about the moon and the sun and such. I really like that element. And then the last one goes to The Weird Sisters by Eleanor Brown. I like the first person plural perspective. Like I said, I've never read anything like that before. It was very unique. Even though it took me a little bit to get used to it, I really ended up enjoying that. I love the emotion of the book. Like, it is so heartbreaking, these women with their own struggles and then their mom battling breast cancer. Like, I really like the emotion there. I like the aspect of life's crossroads. Like, I definitely been dealing with that a little bit myself, and so I kind of really related to that element and just like trying to figure out where you go from here. And then the sisterly love. Like, I enjoyed that one. One is Three Sisters, which I'm one of three as well. And just, my sisters are very different from me. And so I could relate to that, like not really understanding them, but you love them anyway. And so I really like that element. So that is it. I think I ended up hauling 17 books. I got some for August things I'm participating in, and I also got the rest of my Christmas books because I do like a 24-day or 25 days of Christmas. This year it's going to be 24, and I think it's going to be 24 going forward. So I got the books I needed for that as well. And so yeah, it was a good month. I'm very happy with what I got read. I'm happy with what's left over for August and feel pretty confident that I'll be able to finish those books and get my reward. But let me know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in any of these books, what your favorite read was from July, or if you just want to support me and let me know you were here, you can always leave either a rabbit or any type of animal emoji down in the comments below. I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.